Hello, friends, and welcome to the Montessori Mission podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today for episode 4 of this unique view of Montessori. 10 Montessorians, 10 perspectives, 10 questions, 10 communities. And here in episode 4 today, I am so delighted to have with me Trisha Moquino, who is joining us from the Keres Children's Learning Center in Cochiti Pueblo, New Mexico. Trisha is the founder of the Keres Children's Learning Center, and the center is a Keres language revitalization program. It's intergenerational, which is incredible in itself. It's dual language and it's guided by Montessori pedagogy. Trisha was one of the founders of the center, and she has been a powerful advocate for families reclaiming their children's education, an advocate for Indigenous communities, revitalizing their languages. One of her Instagram accounts is Indigenous Cheerleader, which is just such the perfect handle for her. And she is a vital and hugely important force for anti-biased and anti-racist education. She herself was raised in a family who taught her a deep reverence and love and respect for her culture and traditions and language. And so after she graduated from Stanford University, she returned to New Mexico to nurture the new generation of Keres people, Keres children, in her mission to raise up the importance of language and culture and maintain the tradition of the Keres people, but also for many other Indigenous people in the Americas, in Australasia, in Africa. So this is Trisha's life's work. She's dedicated her life to this, and it is such an honor for me to be interviewing her today on the Montessori Mission, and I cannot wait to hear her perspective of Montessori in her community. So Trisha, welcome. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. So shall we begin with the questions?
Yes.
Question 1 for the Montessori Mission is, what does Montessori mean to you?
So Montessori, I first came across Montessori in 1999. At that time was my first year in the public school, our local public school, at Cochiti Elementary, located on our reservation, but very much still the assimilationist model of education. So there was a woman there who I learned about Montessori from, Anne Vieja. But what Montessori, I think, has meant to me the minute I understood a little bit more, that first year that I learned about it, was the possibility for how it could help the tribe revitalize our language. I just saw right away what first and foremost spoke to me was her philosophy around, especially elementary age level children, around cosmic education, because her belief aligned with our belief, which has what our way of life has been around, longer than the Montessori approach or the Montessori method. It's been around for thousands of years, that
Yes.
wisdom. And so just how she says that every child has a cosmic purpose, our belief is the same. We believe that around children, around every child is here for a reason. They have something to teach us. They all have gifts, and it's our job as adults to nurture those gifts, but it's always to nurture those gifts in service to our people, in service to others, and with and in love to others. So that has always really spoke to me. And so in the creation of Keres Children's Learning Center, it is our language and culture, our values, our way of life that guides us in KCLC. And we use Montessori in service to that mission. So Montessori is, um, you know, there's all this stuff coming up around boarding schools right now and residential schools in Canada. And we know that it's in our lives, we know, and people are just, shocked, but this is really something that we have all learned to deal with. And so, what our language and our culture have always been, and Monica Teshlikai out of ASU, Arizona State University, does a lot of research around how language and culture are protective factors. And we absolutely know that for those who did survive boarding school, that is probably what led them through. And so, back to what Montessori has meant to me, what it means to me is it's an opportunity to still provide children with the academic side of what they need to be a part of Western white culture, dominant culture society here in settler colonial United States, but not at the expense of losing us, losing their language. And that's what education has been for far too long. So
Yes.
just really grateful for that.
Wow. That's incredible how you saw those two things entwine, as you say, the cosmic purpose and the purpose within the tribe of service to others. And that's what cosmic education is. As you said, that's what Dr. Montessori wanted the elementary child to start becoming aware of their place in society, and how they can give, and I love the way you said it, in service to others, in service to your people. And I guess in modern day terms, if we're looking at conscious parenting or things like that, then it's very much, a lot of us want to raise our children as contributors rather than consumers, and it all entwines. And as you said, in your culture for thousands of years, that's ingrained. It's part of the fabric of your culture and your traditions and your language. And how beautiful that Montessori has given that a way of that to fit together into the modern world. That's really beautiful. And so, recalling, you said in 1999 was when you first came across Montessori.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recall, for question 2, what was your first light bulb moment on your Montessori path, on your own personal Montessori journey? I know there's hundreds of light bulb moments, aren't there? Is there one you'd like to share with us in particular?
The 3-period lesson. The 3-period lesson, because the Coach T's language revitalization program, they first started a summer program in 1997. In my first year working, had been invited to work as an assistant in the younger age classrooms, and that was in 1998, summer 1998. And I remember, like, you're just all feeling your way through it. I was probably 22, 23 years old, and learning at that point. I had not gone back to grad school yet. I was supposed to go to Columbia Teachers College. I had got accepted to their master's, like for high school, to be a high school teacher. And then when I started working at the language program, they put me with the little ones, like the 3, 4, and 5 years old, and I fell in love. I never
Oh,
had it. I envisioned myself as a teacher, but not with the little ones. And then that was it. That was, I didn't ever, go
yeah.
to teach high school. Yeah. So, um, so the consultant that they had training us in language revitalization, um, that consultant said immersion is the way to go. And
Yes.
so those consultants, is we call her our Chinese grandma, Dr. Lily Wong Fillmore, out of the university, out of UC Berkeley. and she was had two doctoral students under her, and that was Rebecca Blum Martinez and Dr. Christine Sims. And Dr. Christine Sims is from another Keres speaking Pueblo west of Albuquerque, Acoma Pueblo. They call it Sky City. It's really a beautiful place. But they were our three people who guided us in the group and in the work, and they trained us really well in language immersion techniques. And they said immersion is, yes, it's the hardest, but it is the most effective, and
Yeah.
it's what the native Hawaiians use to revitalize their language, and it's what the Maori people use to revitalize their language.
Yeah.
And so as they trained us, and this is the first, I feel like the first 3 years of training, and this was just during the summer while we were actually teaching, and then we would come back together as a group and plan out the lessons for the next day as a group. And I was a younger person, really blessed to be in the company of really fluent speakers and elders, many of now who have passed on, but we were all learning together about how to teach your language, because just because you're a fluent speaker of your language doesn't mean you know how to teach it, because teaching it back in this way was foreign. It wasn't the natural way that we had learned English for those thousands of years, or the way our great grandparents did. So I remember them teaching us the 3 period lesson. This is show me, tell me, right? And then, like, that was summer 1998. So August 1999, a whole year later, is when I started my first year teaching at the local public school, where I said I met Ann Vieja, who had people, the teachers there in K1 2, interested in Montessori, and they started to implement it. And so then I got integrated into that team, K1 2 team, and started learning about Montessori. And then she talked about the 3 period lesson, and I was like, oh, I know what that is, except, Grandma Lily and Rebecca and Chris were not calling it the 3 period lesson, but that's what we were using. That was one of a major technique, especially at the basic levels. So I later on I figured it out, and that Dr. Grandma Lily, she had experience. She wasn't trained in Montessori, but had lots of experience with it, and knew about it, and had worked with it. And so I believe that, that's also where she learned that technique. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is the 3 period lesson, and I've already learned this in our
Mm.
language immersion trainings. But that again was really, what did you call it, a light bulb, or
A light bulb moment. Yeah.
yeah, a light bulb moment. So, any light bulb moment for me has always been, first and foremost, in the ways of the philosophy that aligns with our philosophy of children, because
Mm.
the public school, boarding school, um, the way that has been imposed on our people as Indigenous peoples, and there's over 572 tribes that are still in existence today. It has been one that has always seen us in the deficit, has seen our children in the deficit. It has always been one that has tried to, as Dr. Pratt, or not Dr. Pratt, but General Pratt, who was the founder of the military boarding schools, is kill the Indian, save the man. Um, and has always centered English. You know, with Montessori, there I saw an opportunity for us to, one, support our language and culture, and two, to the way in which she recognized the spirit of the child and didn't try to separate that. Whereas in public school, there's that separation of, what is it, state and church. Even though we're not a church people, we're not an,
Yes.
organized Christianity. We're our own religion and way of life. And so, you know any anything that I saw that aligned with our philosophy around children, is always a light bulb moment. And I continue to have those all the time. And I'm, 20 years into being, I got my elementary training in 2001.
Wow. 20 years as an elementary guide. Wow.
Yeah, not 20 years as an elementary guide. I feel like I wasn't able to fully practice and being an elementary guide till having Keres Children's Learning Center, and we opened in 2012 just with our primary classroom, but did
Yes.
not open the elementary classroom till 2016, and that was a long time since I had been trained to. I was able to practice it here and there at the public school I was at, and then I left public school in '06 to start KCLC, which took
Yes.
another 6 years, but yeah, that was
Yeah.
a long time.
Wow. It's these periods of growth, isn't it? And the right things take time to come to fruition. I really believe that.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful that the parallels are drawn between your as you said, your culture and what's just a normal way of being is aligned with Montessori philosophy. And as you said, the way that education is done is backwards. It sees the child as defective or bad and needs to be corrected. Whereas what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that the spirit of the child is honored first as in the Keres tribe, and I'm sure everywhere, every other Indigenous people as well, the spirit of the child is revered and honored and appreciated first, and then any education, any input that we give as adults has to honor the child first and has to be harmonious. It's not just filling with information. It has to be an enriching addition in addition to the child, something that, as you say, can help them with their cosmic purpose, with how they're going to give their gifts to the world. It's so beautiful. And so, I mean, you've question 3, you've answered this already, but maybe there might be something else that may come to you as I ask the question. So question 3 is, in what ways does Montessori enrich the work that you do?
One of the things I always remember Grandma Lily telling me is, she said, in some ways, because our people have been taught to be ashamed of who we are. We
Mm.
have been taught to be ashamed of our language. We have been taught to be ashamed of our culture. We have been taught that whiteness is something we should be trying to be or trying to do, and that success in that way is what we should be striving or living for. And we know, when you know your language, and I'm not saying I know it fully, I just know enough to know that our languages tell us who we are. I grew up with my grandparents, and my mom's are sisters, so you met my moms a while ago, but their father and my own father passed away when I was 4. And my uncle really stepped into as a father figure, but along with my grandpa. And my grandpa was really very adamant um, about, yes, I support you and we support you in going to school, to college. But you have to remember that our way of life and our language, you still have to continue, that you have to continue to learn. And so I think with like Montessori, was the question, how does it enrich your life? How
Yes,
did
the work that you do. Yes.
how does it enrich what we do? And so back to this whole idea, I remember seeing this poster as a first year teacher, and it said, "Read, you must read to succeed." And I just remember feeling like, no, that's not true, because I remember me having two parents speak two different languages. My dad comes from the Tewa speaking tribe of Okeowenge, formerly known as San Juan Pueblo. They took their name back. And they took their name back, and that's how they're now known officially. And I just remember thinking, no, that's not true. And I remember feeling so many times unsuccessful, not good about myself because I didn't. My language was not my first language. Keres or Tewa was not my first language. English was. And I
Mm,
remember being made fun of in my grandpa's village because I was, they would call me, oh, she's white, or she's Medican because she doesn't speak our language. And then going to Cochiti, and the language shift that they had already begun to experience, there was already shame around if you did know your language, then you were made fun of also. So I was like
yeah,
the extreme on one side and then the
yes,
extreme on the other side. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And really already, but recognizing the power of language. And so, what Grandma Lily said is what Montessori will help you do is it will assure families that they're going to still get a really good education, really
yes,
solid education,
yeah,
while still, while, we're not worried about English. People are going to learn English no matter what. We're
yes,
worried about our
yeah,
language surviving. And so, you can get your children to do reading, writing, and math really well, people will feel secure and trust to continue going back to your own language. And it's not people's our insecurities around success and of course
mm,
academic success. Mind you, children died, people got beaten, they got their mouths washed out with soap. And we just have to think about, like, let's think about my own grandpa who ran away from boarding school 3 times. These were not places that honored children. They were, there's all this stuff coming about it right now, right? But they were, I heard somebody call it a death camp. These were places that were meant to um, kill our people, starting not starting with our children. What Dr. Swina, one of our elders, says is when the wars in the mid 80s stopped, the physical wars, he says that they took that war to our children. And so I just feel like what Montessori helps us to do is to give that sense of security that we can still we can still learn reading, writing, and math in the colonizing language of English, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of losing our own.
yes, yeah, beautiful. That's really well explained. Thank you. And the history and the context, as you say, with what happened in the boarding schools and the dehumanizing, that was the thing, wasn't it? It was it was seeking to be an eradication of your language and culture. And and this is why the program you're doing and many other around the world are so vital, because this, within a couple of generations, this will be the norm. We would hope that the revitalization is just a normal part of life. These the language immersion programs, and as you say, with the balance of academics for those who want the reassurance of the academics, but with the honouring of culture. It's a perfect combination. So the next couple of questions are about moving away from your direct experience and moving towards your experience with children. So question 4 is, what was the first time a child taught you something about yourself that you didn't know? And that can be either a direct interaction or when you were observing a child. When was the first time a child taught you something about yourself that you didn't know?
That's a really good question. And I think about all the children, that I've had the honor to work with. I would say probably when I was still at the public school and having that epiphany that here I was trying to ensure that our daughter spoke Keres as her first language, and then seeing our children, looking at the children. And so at Coach T school, there are non-natives that go there, non-Coach T people that go there, non-Coach T children. And then there's also children from the other village that we're from, of Kiwa, San Domingo, Pueblo. And many of those children that were in my class at that time in 2005, 2006, I would say there was about 3 children whose first language was still Keres. They hadn't experienced language shift to the
Mm.
extent that Coach T did at that
Yeah,
point. And I just remember thinking, wow, what a gift that this child is still talking his language. And
yeah,
he's smart and he is working so hard to learn in a second language. And
mm,
I just remember thinking how smart, how brilliant, like children are in the capacity. And he is about 6 or 7 years old. I think he was in first grade. And just how he showed me just by, and he's not asking to teach me or show me anything, but his existence is resistance. I always hear that our existence is resistance, and his parents, are not framing it like that or anything. But I just think what an amazing job his family has done in ensuring that they made sure they continued to talk to him. And I just remember I could not be complicit in the classroom anymore, that I didn't believe what I was doing was right anymore. It didn't feel good. And there were a number of these epiphanies, probably starting when I had some of those children first who are fluent in their language, whose first language was Keres, and but really feeling deeply along with having my own daughter, making sure she was fluent in our language. Like, we know, maybe it was cognitive dissonance. I don't, just being like, wait, what am I doing? This doesn't make sense. This is not okay. But I think children show us also who we are. Children show us who we are supposed to be. And if we let them, if we listen, if we observe, as Montessori teaches us to do so well, and who are they untouched? In so many ways, if a child is able to let their language, not them letting their language, but if there is a child whose first language is still their indigenous language, first of all, that's a gift. And second of all, I believe that's one of the purest forms of like who we are as indigenous people.
yeah,
Because when you're able to live and think and dream and express yourself in another language besides a colonizing language, those colonizing languages are Spanish, English, French, Portuguese, Dutch, all these, you know, they call them world languages. We need to call them colonizing languages because
mm,
they've
yes,
devastated they've devastated the world in so many ways. And one of the ways they have devastated the world is by not loving and honoring children, is by
yeah,
not centering children. And many of our indigenous cultures, children are at the center.
yeah,
Survival and children are at the center. And I feel like I know that is from our own culture, our own language. Again, our languages tell us who we are. And I've heard Dave Archambault talk about this really beautiful in his TED talk about Dr. Montessori and project-based learning. But I think that is, you know, I feel children teach us something every day, when we're working with them. But largely when I think about where I've taught and why I teach and who I teach, and then how much I am how I'm grateful for Montessori, that's what comes to mind.
Wonderful. It's language is intrinsically linked to cultural heritage, and we, as you say, having the native language as the first language, the mother tongue, and placing that of higher importance than other languages. The importance of that can't be underestimated. And in the work I do with parents here in Dubai, one of the things I talk about a lot, and I place a lot of value and importance on, is for parents to speak Arabic to their children. Firstly, Arabs to speak Arabic, not to place English of higher importance. As you said a few minutes ago, children, everyone will learn English eventually, because that is the dominant language wherever we are in the world for the most part. And I really impress upon parents to speak their mother tongue to their children, because it's tied to cultural identity. And if they are placing English above Arabic, then what is the message they are giving to their children? And in terms of the context we spoke at the beginning about, something that's very close to us here is the Israeli occupation of Palestine, for example. And to my Palestinian friends and Palestinian families I work with, I say you have to speak Arabic to your children, and show that is, and show the beauty and the richness of your language and your cultural heritage above everything else, because that's what your children will imbue, that passion and reverence for your language and your culture. That's what they will value above everything else. But we can't just tell them to do it. We have to live it in our homes. They have to live it in their homes, and live in a way that honors Arab culture, not in a way that celebrates Western culture. So yeah, it really resonates what you're saying, and draws parallels to sort of the situation here in the Middle East. Yeah. And so question 5 is, when was the last time a child taught you something about yourself that you didn't know?
I don't know. I don't know that, we have spent the last year um virtually learning, right? And I'm
Yeah.
grateful that we were able to build, still have and keep school, like Keres Children's Learning Center, going with both our primary and our elementary classroom. But that I didn't know about myself, we were talking about the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 this whole year, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that I didn't know about myself. I think one thing I that they probably taught me, and it's the three oldest, and what they taught me, what they reminded me of, is the how I didn't, here's Keres Children's Learning Center, and I'm in the classroom. I'm trying to run the school, and we have way more help now. Our staff has grown from 3 to 16, which is really,
Wow.
really wonderful. And so I finally feel like I'm at a point where I have a little bit more space to be the teacher that I want to be.
Mhm.
Brain thought space to do that. And so I think in teaching and um, learning alongside with the other co-teacher, Katie Kitchens. She's the English speaking guide, and our Keres speaking elementary assistant, Joelle Cordero. Um, just being, I think, reminded about why I love to teach, why I don't want to leave the classroom, and like they reminded me of why it's so fun, why I enjoy teaching, because I you also get to learn beside them. And we did the Pueblo Revolt this whole year, and they just taught me. They reminded me of how capable as 11-year-olds that yes, we're learning about our own resistance to the Spaniards and colonization in 1680, and then they're able to connect that back to what's happening now with Black Lives Matter and the
Yes.
racial unrest here in America, and then what happened with Palestine, not what happened, but is still happening, and then the uncoverings of those graves hadn't happened yet. We were out of school at that point, but all their connections that you
Mm,
want them to make, that you
yeah.
don't always have to make for them, especially
They're
elementary
making them
kids
themselves.
going on, that they figure out themselves. Yes, yes,
Beautiful. And that's the gift that we can give the elementary child, because they're in that window of social justice and moral justice. They start to join the dots up, and it's so powerful. And that's the gift Montessori. We don't tell them how to think. We we give them the keys, and they can unlock it.
yes.
Wow, that's incredible. And this is the 11-year-old, so in the upper elementary, you were working with them on this.
And well, we worked with all the children, so 1 and 2, but they're our big group. And so as we did shared writing about the Pueblo Revolt starting in February, and everybody contributed. And then now, okay, there's 3 older ones. Let's go write the script for our play. And so I guided writing, shared writing with those three. Then we did the script, because it's easy if you just do it, the teacher, and that's the easy part. But then they don't learn, they don't continue to enrich their learning. And it's better and more powerful if it comes from them. And so, yeah, the 11-year-olds.
Wonderful. Yeah. And if they do that writing, they can really I don't know, receive it into their bodies. Hey, it's then they imbue it. They really, it becomes part of their lived
Yeah.
experience once it's written. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And if anyone who's noticing Trisha's T-shirt when it pops up, it says Montessori for Social Justice on it. And just as we began the interview, she said, "Oh, I was one of the founders of Montessori for Social Justice," on top of everything else, and that was amazing. I didn't know that. So follow the handle at Montessori for Social Justice on Instagram. It's a really great
Yeah.
account.
And I want to say founding board founding board members. Yeah.
Running board members. um, and so, Trisha, thank you for question 6. We have, when was the last time a child caught you out of integrity and questioned you on it?
Caught me out of integrity and questioned me on it.
Yeah.
Um, um, we're a language revitalization school. We're a language immersion school. And it is always a challenge to stay in our language. And it's usually me that's reminding the children, back to Keres, say what you can, say what you can in Keres. Oh, I know you know how to say that in Keres. Say it in Keres. But this is me. I'll be talking in Keres. And so all the time, they'll say, when you mats, they call me by my Keres name. When you mats, Americana ni oshutsa tats nesha zi wakat ni. They'll tell me, when you mats, you talked American. Americana is really American. You talk English. You're supposed to be talking our language. They'll tell me that. Um, and I feel like that is does not happen a lot, but it does happen, and it's really fun now to for that they're the ones reminding us, and they should be. And one of our oldest children, yesterday, 2 days ago, um, NPR, well, an affiliate of NPR, so KUNM, did a story on how the federal United States federal government allotted 20 million to the revitalization of indigenous languages. And so she interviewed Cares Children's Learning Center and Dr. Christine Sims out of UNM. I told you about her earlier. But they interviewed a family, the Swinas. Phoebe Swina and Rex Cariz are the parents, and their children are Marshall and Mililani Swina. And Mililani is one of the 11-year-olds. But in the article, she wrote really beautifully that her mom wants them to continue learning. And then she said, we are learning, and now we teach our mom. And just that reciprocity around children, and like they teach us all the time.
So true. And question 7 is, how did you explain yourself to the children when you were out of integrity?
Yeah, I just, I feel like I wanna acknowledge first that our culture and our family teaches us to always act with integrity,
Yeah.
to be integrated. And
Mm.
what has caused so many people to be disintegrated, and this is not a judgment, but
Mm.
is school. Because
Yeah.
school separates all these us into all these categories, into all these subjects. And I saw somebody make a post about how do you use gratitude in your teaching experience, and I was like, I feel like in a way that kind of bothered me. I think is it's with good intent that that person asked that question, but it is another reason of why we need to support indigenous languages. Everybody talks about culture, culture, culture. No, it's our language first, and our culture and our worldview, everything is embedded in our languages, and then our languages help us make it the culture stronger. And when we learn, relearn, strengthen, revitalize our culture, it reminds us who we are, how we're supposed to behave, how we're supposed to acknowledge um, each other and the living world. And I've heard a fellow Coach T tribal member describe it as our people, our way of life, our language has the highest standards of ethics, of how to be a good human being. And again, it's up to us whether we're gonna to live in those ways even when it's not convenient for us. And so I feel like my grandma, my grandpa, again, my grandparents, you know, one of the things that they really ingrained in my grandma really ingrained is you be humble, you be you practice humility. You do not ever brag. I will never brag about you. No, never. No. And then just
Mm.
with my grandpa just insisting to come home after, going to Stanford University and saying, "Okay, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so honored and blessed that you're gonna go and you're gonna graduate. And then when I did graduate it, but now it's time to come home. And so I wanted to acknowledge that integrity is always something we're striving for in our everyday lives. And then
Yes.
and when you say out of integrity, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And so there's that characteristic of white supremacy culture that is perfectionism, and the
Mm.
ways in which perfectionism is really unhealthy and it
Mm.
makes people sick,
Yeah.
because nothing can ever be perfect enough, and so I feel like one of the things that probably our ancestors recognized a long time ago is, first of all, nothing is perfect. The only thing that is perfect is Mother Earth and the
Yeah.
land, plants and animals and water.
Yeah.
It's humans that are imperfect. And so it only behooves us to to position ourselves as learners, that we are always learning. And so
Yeah.
our elders always say in our language that they don't know everything, and that they are open to continuing to learn and to listen, and then integrate it back into our own beliefs and our own values. And if it sticks and if it matches, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay. That will be what it is, and we have respect for it, but it's not ours. And so when I make a mistake, I'm not afraid to say I've made a mistake. I'm not afraid to be corrected, because um, if I listen, then that's going to only make me a better human being. It's going to make me a better. Children will always make us better teachers if we choose to listen. But even, with my own children, my own daughters, we have our oldest is 17 years old and our youngest is 14, and they tell us, um, they remind us when we're not acting out, acting in integrity, or, Mom, you taught us this, but why did you do this? Or when I recognize that, what, girls, this is how we believe and what I believe, but I see myself doing this or that, and I want you to understand why. But they're also, not afraid to tell me themselves. And as long as we do it respectfully and we take time to listen, you know that's how we'll continue to grow together. And I feel like our culture, our language, and our elders are really beautiful models of that. So lifelong learning.
Yeah. That is, yeah, you're absolutely right. That is really beautiful. First, as you said, that language is intrinsically linked to culture. We can't separate the two. We don't want to separate the two. So language learning, the mother tongue language learning has to be the most important step. And as you said about being out of integrity, the humility is so powerful with our children, that being able to say we made a mistake, as you said, and this obsession with perfectionism it causes so many mental health issues and all types of other issues, actually. Um, and it is a bit of a curse, isn't it? This curse of seeking perfectionism the whole time. And when I think, as you said, it gives us, our children, so much more of a powerful lesson if we are showing humility and we can apologize and make amends. And that's the role modeling, as Dr. Montessori taught us, showing a child something is so much more powerful than using words.
Yes.
So showing how we are living and role modeling humility, and being humble, that's immensely powerful. So moving on to question 8, please, Trisha. What is your favorite Dr. Montessori quote?
My favorite Dr. Montessori quote is, of all, what is it? Of all things, love is the most potent.
Yes.
Um,
Oh,
I have
gorgeous.
a beautiful picture of our first year of being open at KCLC, and it was with my nephew. And I told you about Mililani Swina a while ago, who's,
Yes.
they and it's them. hopefully if I can find it, it's them on one of our long walks. We used to take really long, we used to take really long walks, but it was, it is them holding hands. It's a picture from the back, and it's that when I think of that quote, I always think of that really beautiful picture that we captured of them. But yeah, that's one my favorite. The
Yeah.
one first and foremost because I'm grateful to have come from a family that is uh that was so loving, that was able to continue to stay in that space of how we're taught to just love. And it's hard to do, but I'm just really grateful, grateful for that because it really is true of all things. Love is the most
Yeah.
potent, and
I
I
can
don't
do.
want to like romanticize that, because it's too often romanticized it, and people talk about it but people don't do it, because
Mm,
truth is an act of love, justice is an act of love. And how can you do that outside of your family?
yeah.
How can you do that outside of your true children? And that's when it matters. Don't go talking about love if you cannot do it for other children, if you
Mm,
cannot do it for other people.
yes. Yeah. Who are not like us or different in some way, whose views we disagree with or what have you. How can we still keep um, love when it challenges us? I think. Yeah. Wow. I love that quote as well. Beautiful. Thank you. And question 9, please, Trisha. What is your deepest desire for Montessori for the future?
My deepest desire for Montessori for the future is for it to be in all, for children of color, first Black and Indigenous children of color, to have access to it, but to
Yeah.
have access into it in a way that amplifies their own community, their own
Yes.
languages. First, there's so many people that idolize Montessori, like hero worship her and the Montessori approach in a way that is not okay either. So using Montessori education in service to what the community wants. So what we say
Yeah.
about Montessori, and how we use it, is that we use it in service to our mission of language revitalization, and not the other way around. And
Yes.
so, I feel like I really want, I would really love to see, um I think I would really love to see, like, for those, we started the Indigenous Montessori Institute, which is a teacher training program that is in its infancy. It's our third year. And we partner with the Southwest Institute of Montessori Studies here in Phoenix, which is why I'm visiting for 2 weeks. Um, but to Also, for Montessori to look at itself, the way in which it is complicit in racism, it is complicit in settler colonialism,
Yes.
the way it is complicit in the oppression of um, Black, Indigenous, children of color, AAPI, Mexican American, um, all the marginalized communities,
Yes.
in any settler colonial country. And because that has to be reckoned with as well. We have to just always remember that we want to use it in service to the community and the children of that
Yes.
community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful. And in our training, that is what a huge emphasis is placed upon that, isn't it? The spiritual preparation of the adult. There's that quote, I can't recall from which book, of how the adult needs to tear out the roots of prejudice when they look at a child. The child is new every day. All of these things that are part of our spiritual preparation, that should be part of the spiritual preparation of the adult. That are vital for us to do, and have that self-reflection in our own practice as Montessorians or non-Montessori educators, and as parents as well. You know, what are we doing to we can ask ourselves, what are we doing to create a more just world? Yeah, very much so. And what do you see is your role in achieving this this desire for Montessori in the future? That's question 10.
I feel like I have been on that journey with helping to co-found KCLC, and I say I co-founded it because I, I wouldn't have been able to do it without our board of directors and our tribal leadership, our tribal council, who gave us the blessing to do it. And so, um, the work of Keres Children's Learning Center, one of the things our elders tell us is anybody who comes here to visit and learn from KCLC, do not be stingy with what we have learned, what you have learned. And when they want to know about what we do at KCLC, take time to talk with them. And, we get a lot of visitors, especially from other tribes, not just local, but nationally. And so it's also why we started our symposium, our annual symposium. This year, the focus is on anti bias racism, and it already was going to be that last November, but then the pandemic happened, so we had to cancel it. But Wilhelmina Yazi, the lead plaintiff in the Yazi Martinez versus the state of New Mexico court case, they ruled in her favor and basically stated, in fact, Native American children are not being provided an adequate education by the state of New Mexico. So they ruled in favor of her. She is
Wow.
a keynote speaker um, due to Flying Earth, and Wilhelmina is Navajo. Due to Flying Earth is from the Standing Rock tribe, but works is a leader at Native American Community Academy. Will speaker, and then Tiffany Jewell, who wrote this book is anti-racist, will be our
Yes.
keynote. So we
Yeah.
provide that at a low cost,
Mhm.
and it's many of our own local people from our tribes locally that attend. But we also launched the Indigenous Monastery Institute, and I really love and appreciate the quote by Dr. Mariana Soto Manning, an early childhood professor out of Columbia Teachers College, who talks about the ways in which teacher education, teacher training programs are deeply implicated in the perpetuation of white supremacy culture, which we're all ruled by. That's the dominant culture. Um, that's settler colonial society,
Yeah.
and that in order to fundamentally transform what teachers are doing, what education is doing, we have to transform teacher training. And
Mhm.
so for us at KCLC, we already knew that we need our teachers to be trained in language immersion techniques, dual language education, being critically conscious, and of
Mhm.
course, Montessori. And we couldn't just send them to UNM or CNM or Santa Fe Community College, because then we would have to deprogram them. So we recognize that we
Yeah.
would have to create this teacher training center ourselves. So I think that is the work that is the work that, and it's not my work alone, it's a shared work that we all, at Cares Children's Learning Center, Tracy Cordero, who's the director of the Indigenous Monastery Institute, Mara Madison, who is our administrator, Curtis Chavez, our development director, our elders, Yuli Quintana, Elena Arcaro, Bernard Swina, Anita Swina, all our staff, all our families. I feel like we are doing our part.
So extraordinary how the vision came about, and as you say, it's simple, isn't it? It's common sense. If we are going to change the way that children's futures are shaped, we have to start with the way that teachers are trained. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, we can't put teachers into a system, a colonized system, and expect them to be able to then celebrate Indigenous culture. It doesn't, as you say, you said they have to be then deprogrammed afterwards. So that makes, so yeah, the Indigenous Montessori Institute is, what a powerful vehicle for change. Trisha, thank you so much for answering all of my questions in such depth and being so generous with your time. And now I would love for you to share about KCLC and Indigenous educators and everything that you would like to tell us about how we can contribute, how the audience can learn more, make a difference, how they can support the vital work that you're doing in protecting and revitalizing Indigenous cultures.
So our work can be found at KCLC Montessori.org. That's our website, and the information about the Indigenous Montessori Institute is also on our website. And we are set up as a not-for-profit and have been from the beginning, because we did not want to accept funding from the state or federal government that would tie us to English, to testing, and then all testing is done in English, and that already competes with our mission. So we are a not-for-profit, and so any donations help keep us open, help keep us afloat. And the donate button is on our website. You can follow us on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is at KCLC6. And on Facebook, you just punch in Keres Children's Learning Center. And that is our social media. And we always appreciate any support that we receive, even if it's prayers, even if it's, amplification, making space for us, just as you have, Charlotte, for making space for us. And thank you for not being complicit in our erasure, and for making sure that you had an Indigenous person from settler colonial United States. Thank you for asking. Thank you for supporting our children.
Thank you so much. It's really been such an honor to speak to you, and a great pleasure to learn from you today, and from all the wisdom that you bring. And I love you say that so generously every time you talk about not only your wisdom, but the wisdom from your family and the community and the elders. And I noticed that you acknowledge that. So it's really so wonderful for us all to experience that and be part of it. Thank you so much. To you, Trisha. It's been a lot of fun, and I loved meeting all of your family at the beginning of the call. That was a lot of fun as well. That was great. Their laughter was amazing. When we started this interview at 5 a.m. In Arizona time, and Trisha's family, and the joy and laughter that we could hear in the background at 5 a.m. was extraordinary. It sounded like a lot of fun indeed. Such joy. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the Montessori Mission podcast. And this is a unique podcast series: 10 Montessorians, 10 questions, 10 communities, 10 perspectives of Montessori. This has been Trisha Moquino from the Keres tribe in Cochite Pueblo in New Mexico. Thank you so much, Trisha, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.